Some people say the biggest accomplishment you can have in your life is to win a fantasy football championship. Well, you cannot do that if you're drafting bum wide receivers with little to no upside in your fantasy football drafts. Today, I'm going over 3 do not draft wide receivers we need to be avoiding based on their current ADP that will not provide value for you in 2024 fantasy football. Let's not waste your time. Let's hop right into 3 must-avoid wide receivers in fantasy football. The first wide receiver I'm talking about today is Drake London for the Atlanta Falcons. Now, many people love London coming into the 24 campaign with newly acquired quarterback Kirk Cousins coming to town. However, I am not willing to pay this top tier price tag. Currently, Drake London going ADP number 14 overall, so you're paying a high second round pick to get the third year wide receiver from USC, when frankly in his first 2 years, he has shown no indication that he has this upside. He's going as the 12th wide receiver off the board, when last year he finished outside the top 30 wide receivers. Now, many people will point to the horrible quarterback play he had to endure over the last 2 seasons with guys like Taylor Heineke, Marcus Mariota, and Desmond Ridder. But a guy from the very same draft class as Drake London, Garrett Wilson, has also had to deal with a lot of the same issues at the quarterback position in New York, maybe even worse quarterback play, and he has outperformed Drake London in nearly every category. In their first 2 respective careers, London has yet to eclipse 1,000 yards receiving, been under that mark in both of his first 2 years, while Garrett Wilson has been able to put up over 1,000 yards in each of his first 2 years in one of the worst offenses in the entire NFL with the New York Jets. So not only does Drake London not have exciting statistics from his first 2 years that would indicate a breakout year with new quarterback Kirk Cousins, his efficiency numbers, even with this bad quarterback play, have also been pretty bad. Many people want to indicate that London's going to be this wide receiver 1 alongside Kirk, like Justin Jefferson was, but last year Drake London didn't even have a top 24 team target share for this Atlanta Falcons team when he had really no competition on the outside. This year the Falcons bring in Darnell Mooney and Rondale Moore, who aren't super exciting players, but definitely are guys that can perform in this league. Those 2 guys at the wide receiver position to go along with Kyle Pitts, who we know is the most talented receiving prospect at the tight end position of all time. So he's not able to acquire an elite team target share in the previous 2 years. I don't expect that to drastically change with Kirk Cousins getting these new weapons in Atlanta. The volume doesn't blow me away in Atlanta. And if he's not going to be a high volume guy, he needs to be winning with efficiency, and these metrics just weren't that great last year. He's outside the top 50 in yards after the catch. In the NFL, yards after the catch has been one of the most important calculations for the wide receiver positions as of late. A lot more attention has been going into this number, and Drake London just simply has not shown that elite elusiveness after the catch to extend plays. Now, if he's not winning after the catch, he has to win at the catch point. He is a good jump ball wide receiver, but the numbers show he is not separating from the defenders very well. He is number 72 ranked wide receiver in 2023 in route wins. So 71 other wide receivers were winning on more routes than Drake London was in 2023. Not only do some of these statistics concern me for his upside in 2024, the Atlanta Falcons also have the 12th hardest schedule for wide receivers this upcoming year. Now, we talked about in our breakout video, we included Bijan Robinson on that video because the Falcons face the 7th easiest strength of schedule for running backs. So I do expect this Falcons team to lean heavily on the run game and then follow that run game up with some added in passing plays, but with a very tough strength of schedule receiving wise and some of these metrics that are pretty concerning for Drake London from 2023. I think paying a high second round draft capital to acquire Drake London this year is way too high in my opinion, especially when you consider this guy hasn't even eclipsed top 24 in his entire career. Like we said earlier, last year he was ranked outside the top 30 wide receivers. This is way too high of a price tag in the early second round. This is very reminiscent of the Michael Pittman and Courtland Sutton hype coming into fantasy football over the past couple of seasons. Michael Pittman with Matt Ryan, new quarterback for the Colts, and Russell Wilson for Courtland Sutton 2 seasons ago. These guys were going in the 3rd to 4th round. The hype surrounding these players was insane, and they disappointed in fantasy. Now, Pittman and Sutton did have pretty solid 2023 campaigns, especially for where you drafted them. much later than that 4th round price tag you had to pay to acquire them when they got these veteran quarterbacks added into their offense that people just assumed were going to elevate their fantasy production. It did not happen. I envision that happening with Drake London, and drafting him in the early 2nd round, I just don't see any upside with that play. I think you're much better suited taking some of these other wide receiver options at that position. For a very talented wide receiver like London is, going in the top 10 of the NFL draft a couple of years ago, I do not envision him taking a massive leap in fantasy after 2 disappointing years to start his career in Atlanta. Next guy I want to talk about is Terry McLaurin, wide receiver for the Washington Commanders. McLaurin always seems to get some love from the fantasy football community, even though he has yet to have a top 24 finish on a points per game basis in fantasy. This year, his ADP is right around wide receiver 31, which you may think is a decent value for a guy getting the Heisman Trophy winner as his quarterback, the 2nd overall pick in the NFL draft. But there are a number of reasons why I think McLaurin is being overvalued and overdrafted in 2024. Like I said, he is the number 31 wide receiver off the board. But when we take a look at what he did last season, I think that number is way too high. Last year, he finished as the wide receiver 34 in an offense that led the entire National Football League in pass attempts. That is correct. Maybe a little bit surprising to some people, but Sam Howell and the Washington Commanders led the entire NFL in passing attempts. Over 600 pass attempts for Sam Howell. Some people may say Sam Howell, he wasn't that good. Yes, he was throwing a lot of attempts, but he wasn't completing many passes. He still had the 4th most completions in the NFL. So you have the most passing attempts and the 4th most passing completions for the Commanders offense. Terry McLaurin was still only able to finish as wide receiver 34. Now, it doesn't take a wizard to understand that that number is going to decrease this year. The Commanders are not going to lead the NFL in passing attempts. While Jaden Daniels is a very talented quarterback, at LSU, he did a lot of his damage on the ground. A very elusive runner, making some serious highlight reel plays on the ground for that Tigers offense. While Daniels did excel in the passing game in his final year in Baton Rouge, that was his clear kryptonite through his early college days. Deep ball accuracy was a problem for Daniels. Now, he did clear up these issues in his final season at LSU, but I don't necessarily expect him to be dicing up defenses through the air his rookie year. We know his speed and elusiveness will transfer to the NFL, but I think it is very well within the realm of possibility that he struggles passing the football like Justin Fields did in his early career, relying on that run game. While that is very valuable for Jaden Daniels in fantasy, it does not necessarily assist Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. And for a guy in McLaurin who had the lowest receiving yardage total he has had since his rookie season, in an offense, like we mentioned, with the most passing attempts in the NFL, this is not a wide receiver I expect to have any sort of upside where you're drafting him at wide receiver 31. Hasn't had that top 24 finish on a points per game basis like we talked about. And I expect this offense to run through Jaden Daniels' legs and not necessarily his arm, especially in the early portion of his career. Next wide receiver I am not drafting in 2024 fantasy football drafts is Deandre Hopkins. Going as a top 50 wide receiver in fantasy football drafts, I have no idea why. This is not Houston Texans DeAndre Hopkins. This is not even Arizona Cardinals DeAndre Hopkins. We are looking at Tennessee Titans DeAndre Hopkins at 32 years old. Please name me some fantasy wide receivers that deliver top 24 or even 30 options at 32 years of age. I can guarantee the list is very short, and we've even seen a drop-off in Hopkins' production after age 30. Just from 2022 to 2023, we saw a significant drop-off in a points per game average from Hopkins. He goes from 80 receiving yards a game in 2022 to 62 receiving yards a game, nearly a 20 yardage drop-off in 1 year. I expect that trend to continue, unfortunately, for Hopkins. Not only are the yards dropping off, also the receptions, as you might imagine. He goes from 7 receptions a game to under 4.5 receptions a game in 2023. And it doesn't look like he's getting much help from Will Levis, quarterback out of Kentucky. Not necessarily someone I'm expecting to have a sophomore breakout season, especially when we consider this Tennessee Titans offense is facing the 5th toughest schedule for wide receivers, going up against a multitude of great passing game defenses. This is just not a wide receiver I want to be putting any sort of value into in my drafts. I want to be fading pretty much across the board, especially in the top 50 range where he is going for wide receivers. While Will Levis did show glimpses in his rookie year, he was still under 200 passing yards in 4 out of his 8 games. If this offense is going to be under 200 passing yards, there is very little on the bone for Hopkins to pick up, especially when you consider all the options they added from free agency this offseason. This Tennessee Titans wide receiver core is pretty deep. The team is obviously giving Will Levis every opportunity he has to succeed. Hopkins, number one. Tyler Boyd comes over from Cincinnati. Calvin Ridley comes over from Jacksonville. And obviously they still have Treylon Burks, a first-round wide receiver they drafted from the University of Arkansas. So these are four solid wide receivers in this offense for the Titans. And at age 32, I don't see how Hopkins is going to be able to differentiate himself and hold on to that wide receiver one spot. We've seen his numbers dropping over the past couple of years. This Tennessee offense has leaned on the run game for so many years with Henry. Now they bring in Tony Pollard and maybe give Tajay Spears a run at it. With the added competition, with the questionable quarterback play from Will Levis, and the efficiency metrics dropping for Hopkins at age 32, I don't see how you can justify picking him as a top 50 wide receiver in your fantasy drafts. But those are my top 3 must-avoid wide receivers for 2024 fantasy football. We started with Drake London in the early second round. We followed that up with Terry McLaurin for the Commanders, and we ended it with Deandre Hopkins for the Tennessee Titans. Let me know if you agree with these wide receivers that I am fading in 2024 fantasy football. If you disagree, let me know why you're drafting these guys and prove me wrong. I love hearing your guys' feedback. Drop a comment if you have any sort of fantasy football questions. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more fantasy football content. We are going to keep churning these videos heading into the 2024 season. Get you ready for your fantasy football drafts. But that's going to do it. We thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next week with another episode of the Fantasy Birds.